Hello, good morning everyone. My name is Rafaela Sinangchi and I will be presenting chapter 15 Language and Attitude. I will try to make the presentation as short as I can, so please bear with me. So, first of all, what is language attitude? According to sociolinguists, language attitudes are opinions, ideas, and prejudices that the speakers have towards a language. In other words, it is how we act towards a language. It can be positive and it can also be a negative attitude. There are a few examples that I will explain after this regarding both positive and negative attitude towards a language. So, the first example is the issue of pronouncing R. It is one of the best examples of the arbitrariness of the linguistic features. We can see at the example below. This example is from the textbook page 409. From the example, some people pronounce Lore as lore and some people pronounce it as law, which is quite similar to law as in the law and order. This shows that this person is have negative attitude towards those who are not R pronouncing. In communities, R pronouncing is regarded as one of the example of good speech. However, in other communities, it is regarded as humorous, rustic, and evidence of lack of education. Alright, the second is intelligibility. Okay, intelligibility is affected by our attitude towards a language. It is found that it is easier for us to understand words spoken by people we like or admire. People who are highly motivated are often more successful on acquiring a language when they feel positive towards those who use it. For example, we all know that one person who is a Korean drama addict, right? We must know that one person. And then they usually use Korean phrases, and as time passes, the Korean phrases become a whole sentence. So these people take online classes for Korean language and they can successfully acquire it without any problem. So having a positive attitude towards the language users play an important role to acquire the language. Okay, next. In the previous chapters, we have learned that attitude towards a language is heavily influenced by social and political factors. So, that is why language planners have to consider people's attitude toward a language when selecting language as an official or national language. Official status given to unpopular language has caused a lot of problem. So there has been riots in India and Belgium that incited bombing and removal of English signboard due to language issues. In 1960s, French Canadians tend to rate English Canadian voice on tape positively. And then in 1970s, the French Canadian was rated higher due to political awareness. So, we can see how political factor heavily influence people's attitude towards a language. Right? Next, we will get into overt and covert prestige. What is prestige? So, prestige is the level of regard normally accorded a specific language or dialect within a speech community relative to other language or dialects. The concept of prestige in sociolinguistics provides one explanation for the phenomenon of the variation of forms among speakers of language. Okay, so now we will look into overt prestige. The key point of overt prestige is reasonably self-evident. Overt prestige has a set of standard variety in a community. Overt prestige is when the speech indexes their high social status. This is how language reflects our status. Regardless of variation in their own speech, they all recognize that one variety as the standard norm for the community. On the other hand, covert prestige is a positive attitude towards a vernacular or standard or non-standard speech varieties. The idea of covert prestige was introduced by William Labov, who noticed that even speakers used who use non-standard dialects often believed that their own dialect was bad or inferior. Clearly, such varieties are valued or they will not continue to be used, right? So, next we will look into attitude towards standard English and vernacular form of English. So, standard English has an enormous legacy of overt prestige. It has been regarded as a symbol of British nationhood. Even outside Britain, received pronunciation is still an overtly admired model in many other countries where English is used, such as Singapore and New Zealand. So, this shows that the positive attitude towards standard English. On the other hand, vernacular form of English are usually frowned upon. While attitudes are changing and new varieties of British Black English, such as multicultural London English, are rapidly developing, these varieties can still be described as vernacular varieties, which are generally condemned and ridiculed by those who consider themselves as the guardian of the language, not guardian of the galaxy. So, next, collecting information about attitude towards a language is a tricky business. There are three methods proposed by the textbook. So, the first is societal treatment. Sociolinguists can infer attitudes by observing the way language is used in a public domain. The second is direct measures. Sociolinguists can ask direct questions about people's attitude to a particular language or language varieties or even linguistic features. And lastly, indirect measures. Sociolinguists can use indirect measure which elicits the respondent's attitude without making them feeling self-conscious or embarrassed. In this part of the presentation, when we are discussing this particular topic, we will always be comparing these two classes of children, which are working class children and middle class children. So, sociolinguistics has done many tests before and proved that middle class children in terms of speech communities always do better than those in working class children. This is proven, and one of the reasons is actually influenced by the vernacular dialects. Working class children usually use vernacular dialects, and middle class children usually use standard English. The use of vernacular forms or a distinct variety may act as a barrier to communication between the teacher and the student. This barrier, the dialect difference, can certainly lead to miscommunication. It is a waste of time for the teachers and parents trying to correct the children if they do not want to sound different, as in changing their vernacular form to standard English. What parents and teacher can do is simply motivate the student or the children in a very positive way so they feel they would like to shift from vernacular form to standard English. Make the teachers and the parents should make the student realize that the educational advantage of using standard English. Next, we will get into linguistic deficit. As we all know, deficit means something is lacking or not enough. So, linguistic deficit is a related area where sociolinguistic research has been proved useful in the area of educational testing. Sociolinguists have successfully demonstrated that the claim that minority group children and working class children were linguistically deprived were generally based on inadequate tests. An example I will give you an example to illustrate this point. Okay, so in order to determine the extent of vocabulary and grammar of the student, it is usual to ask the student to complete a number of language tests, right? So, at one time, these tests were ministered by adult stranger from a different social background from the child, and sometimes the different ethnic group from the child too. So, as a rule, each child will be interviewed individually in a quiet room in the school. So children from the minority and working class didn't do really well in this test under these conditions. So they responded monosyllabically, saying as little as possible and escaping with relief after it was all over. Middle class children, on the other hand, tended to do much better. They were much more willing to answer the question at length. So, sociolinguists pointed out that although those administering them thought they were administering these tests under standard and controlled condition, there were in fact some important differences in the experience of middle class children compared to other being tested. Okay? So now we will move to the last subtopic of this chapter, which is sociolinguistic and forensic linguistics. So forensic linguistics work in a very wide range of social contexts. A forensic linguistic performs language analysis on written or recorded document to help solve crime. A forensic linguist studies dialect, grammar, sentence construction, phonetics, and other linguistic areas to determine authenticity and ensure correct interpretation. In addition to research about how language is used in written and spoken legal setting, they also provide expert evidence to courts about language issues. Sometimes this involves the analysis of language and communication in legal contexts such as police interviews, courtroom interaction, and legal documents. Forensic linguists have contributed as expert witness to court cases involving murder, sexual assault, kidnapping, fraud, drug dealing, and many more such serious crimes or legal injustice. Forensic linguistic Forensic linguists examine every level of linguistic analysis. Phonetic analysis provide information on regional and social accent, which has often assisted in eliminating crime suspects. So, for example, you can find this in the textbook too. A British dialectologist was able to accurately identify the Sunderland accent on Hawks tape sent to the police by someone who claimed to be the infamous serial killer Yorkshire Ripper. So the linguist's phonetic analysis were proved right 26 years later when DNA from the envelope seal confirmed the identity of the hoaxer. So forensic linguists have also used discourse analysis to examine courtroom interaction for evidence of potential injustice. In cross-examination, the lawyer's choice of word can be very significant in conveying a particular perspective. So for examples, you can take a look at page 430 to 432 for further understanding. So As a conclusion, the attitudes of language that happen in the society are influenced by the community of language itself as an education to communicate and understand each other. Language attitudes are very sensitive to social and political change. Social linguistic research can assist in identifying points of potential conflict and suggesting alternative styles of interaction which may be more successful. Sociolinguistic information can usefully illuminate many everyday interaction in speech community. Okay, well, that is all from me. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the video. Have a nice day, everyone.